Look for new opportunities. The message to Jamaican manufacturers and exporters this evening amidst news of a 10% tax on Jamaican goods being sent to the United States.
Reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal. That means they do it to us and we do it to them.
These countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything, sir.
Every available diplomatic channel, including working with our CARICOM brothers and sisters and utilizing the Office of Trade Negotiations to seek to preserve the positions our exporters have secured over decades of deepening trade ties with the United States.
What the U.S. is doing now is not reform. It is rejecting the very system it created.
Jamaica just got hit with 10% tariff from the United States. And this could change everything. When Donald Trump stood in the White House Rose Garden and announced sweeping tariffs on nearly every country, Jamaica was not spared. Now Jamaica's biggest trading partner is about to make their goods more expensive overnight. But here is the real question. Is this the end of the Caribbean Basin Initiative? And what does this mean for ordinary Jamaicans? Let's break this down.
Message from the Prime Minister comes as the country awaits details on the trade arrangements. The Prime Minister was speaking last evening at the launch of Expo Jamaica.
Here's Andrea Chisholm with the details.
Jamaica, like the rest of the world, has been on edge since U.S. President Donald Trump announced a new tariff structure. The U.S. is Jamaica's largest trading partner, and since 1983, Jamaica has been part of the Caribbean Basin Initiative, CBI, which provides duty-free access for items sent to the U.S. market. Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness says 90% of Jamaican exports benefit from the CBI. But given Trump's announcement of a 10% tariff on Jamaican goods, that special arrangement is in question.
While the government of Jamaica has not yet received formal notification on the precise implementation procedures, including whether these new tariffs will override existing CBI provisions, we are actively engaging with the United States Trade Representative and other relevant authorities to seek urgent clarification.
The Caribbean Basin Initiative, CBI, was part of discussions with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. This was the Prime Minister at the press conference.
The renewal of the Caribbean Basin Economic Recovery Act was raised as a matter of critical importance to trade for ourselves and for all CARICOM member states.
The U.S. law which governs the CBI is set to expire in September 2030. Mr. Rubio did not mention the CBI in his speech, but he said the U.S. was realigning its global trade policy.
And from that will come real opportunities to create new alignments and new trade arrangements and new trade opportunities. And I believe Jamaica is one of those places that together we both stand to benefit.
And so Jamaica awaits clarification on the 10% U.S. tariff set to take effect on April 5. The Prime Minister says a detailed assessment is being carried out.
We will use every available diplomatic channel, including working with our CARICOM brothers and sisters and utilizing the Office of Trade Negotiations to seek to preserve the positions our exporters have secured over decades of deepening trade ties with the United States. Preliminary analysis indicates that some of our top exports may fall under exempted product categories, and we are working to confirm and, where possible, to expand these exemptions. Again, I must emphasize that clarity is still needed on several matters.
Even though global trade has been disrupted, Dr. Holness says the government stands ready to help the business community and gave them this message.
There are opportunities that must be had. There are prospects to be uncovered. And so I urge my manufacturers, my business people, before you start to look at the negative, also look for the opportunities.
Jamaica is among several countries that have been hit with 10% tariffs on its exports to the United States.
The announcement was made late this afternoon by U.S. President Donald Trump. All CARICOM countries have been hit with 10% tariffs, except Guyana, which will get 38%, and Trinidad and Tobago, 12%.
The new tariffs will take effect on Saturday, April 5, and Mr. Trump says it will start a, quote, golden age for America. Now, when contacted, President of the private sector organization of Jamaica, Mitri Siaga, says the organization is awaiting details.
April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again.
President Donald Trump unveiling his new tariff policy to the world Wednesday. While speaking to a crowd in the White House Rose Garden, he announced an at least 10% tariff on practically all goods coming into the United States, plus even higher rates on dozens of countries that have the highest trade deficits with the United States.
Reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal. That means they do it to us and we do it to them.
The president said the United States would use the money generated from tariffs to, quote, reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt.
Now, there's been concern among local economists that the 10% tariff on all exports to the United States could result in a widening of Jamaica's trade deficit. The gap between imports and exports amounted to almost $5 billion last year, and the tariff means Jamaica's exports to that country will become more expensive. Jamaica exported goods valued at $674.2 million to the United States during the first 11 months of 2024.
That governments use to borrow money on financial markets. Now, they're normally seen as a very safe haven for investors in times of strife, so governments only have to offer a very low interest rate on them. What we saw happening in the last couple of days is a lot of sellers actually in that market, a lot of people offloading those bonds, which caused some alarm and some questions about financial stability in the US, potentially further down the line. So therefore, many are thinking that that actually spooked the president. Also, a big holder of those bonds is China. So was China actually retaliating in that way? So has he tried to calm the markets down by announcing this pause? You heard that phrase, it's all about the art of the deal. But let me tell you, when you talk to businesses out there, what they actually say is that he's created this vacuum now in which uncertainty is thriving, and therefore they're paralyzed by fear and anxiety. Do they invest? Do they actually get the kind of machinery, upskill workers in the way the president wants to guarantee the long-term success of America? Or frankly, will they be wrong-footed in perhaps maybe a matter of not days, but hours? So if that was actually his aim, then frankly, it may be backfiring.
And on China, I mean, these tariffs were 125%. The White House say actually the total, when you take into consideration earlier tariffs of 20%, it all adds up to 145. Well, I mean, it's whopping, it's eye-watering, whatever numbers you look at. And we are in this trade war now between the United States and China, the two biggest global economic powers. What are the consequences of that for the rest of the world?
Huge, Ben, in a sentence, or in a word rather. Do you remember that phrase, conscious uncoupling? I think it was Gwyneth Paltrow who used it about her divorce many years ago. This is what's happening here. China and the US between them account for a third of global goods, right? So you've got this separation between the two of them getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And as a result of that, what you're seeing is disruption on either side. Now, we're hearing all sorts of reports about Chinese companies rushing to try and relocate production, for example, or figure out how much extra they can charge American consumers without frankly going bust. And that can cause all sorts of disruption, given the global nature of supply chains, given that these companies sell all over the world to buyers around the world too. American consumers account for 1 in 6, 7 dollars of all of those spent in the world. So if they're not buying, other countries aren't selling. So this may look like it's kind of slightly, over there, thousands of miles away from many countries, and there's a pause elsewhere. But let's not forget, there are some severe consequences that many are going to feel in the weeks and months to come.
All right, Darshini, for the moment, thank you very much.
The US has imposed a blanket 10% tariff on imports for nearly all countries. On top of that, it has layered on higher tariffs, up to 50% for selected countries, especially those that run a trade surplus with the US. According to the administration, the sweeping tariffs are needed to fix America's trade imbalances. But there is nothing inherently wrong about running a trade deficit. It simply means that American consumers are buying more from the world than the world is buying from America. Moreover, the focus has been solely on the goods trade. That only gives a partial picture. In fact, the US runs a surplus with many of its trading partners in services, exporting software services, education, entertainment, financial and business services. But this fact has been completely ignored. In Singapore's case, we have an FTA with America. We impose zero tariffs on US imports, and we actually run a trade deficit with the US, meaning we buy more from them than they do from us. If the tariffs were truly reciprocal, and if they were meant to target only those with trade surpluses, then the tariff for Singapore should be zero. But still, we are being subjected to the 10% tariff. We are very disappointed by the US move, especially considering the deep and long-standing friendship between our two countries. These are not actions one does to a friend.
The US has imposed a blanket 10% tariff on imports from most countries. Some nations are facing even higher rates. Jamaica, along with most CARICOM states, will face 10%, Guyana 38%, Trinidad and Tobago 12%. This directly affects Jamaican exports going to the US, Jamaican largest trading partner. According to reports, Jamaica exported over $674 million worth of goods to the US in the first 11 months of 2024. Now imagine those goods suddenly becoming 10% more expensive. That's not small. Since 1983, Jamaica has benefited from the Caribbean Basin Initiative, which gave duty-free access to many of Jamaica's products entering the US market. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says 90% Jamaican exports benefits from the CBI. But here is the problem. They don't know yet if these new tariffs override the CBI, and that's huge. If the CBI protections are weakened or effectively neutralized, Jamaican exporters lose a competitive edge they have had for decades. Andrew Holness says Jamaica is engaging diplomatically, working with the US Trade Representative, CARICOM partners, the Office of Trade Negotiations. He is urging manufacturers not to panic but to look for opportunities. That's leadership message of stability. But the reality, businesses don't like uncertainty. Investors freeze when the rules suddenly change. This isn't just about Jamaica. The US is also escalating tariffs against China, with rates reportedly going above 100% in some cases. This signals a deeper economic decoupling between the world's two largest economies. When that happens, supply chains get disrupted, investment slows, global growth weakens, small economies feel the shock first, and Caribbean economies are fragile. JP Morgan is already forecasting a 60% chance of global recession by 2025. If America slows down, they feel it. Tourism, remittances, exports, everything. Some economists argue tariffs are meant to reduce America's trade deficit. But here is what is interesting. The US runs deficit in goods, but runs surpluses in services like software, entertainment, finance, and education. So the full trade picture isn't as simple as America is losing countries like Singapore, which even have free trade agreements and zero tariffs on US goods, still got hit with the 10%. That shows this is about a broad shift in US trade policy, not just targeting unfair partners. What this means for Jamaica: exports could drop if US buyers look for cheaper suppliers. Trade deficit could widen. Local manufacturers may struggle to absorb or pass on costs. CARICOM unity will be tested. But here is the opportunity side. If global supply chains shift, Jamaica could attract companies relocating closer to the US market. That's the strategic play. The question is, are they ready? This moment could redefine Jamaica's economic future. For decades, Jamaica operated within a US-led trade system that offered stability and predictability. Now that system is shifting. Whether this becomes a crisis or an opportunity depends on diplomacy, regional coordination, local innovation, and economic diversification. The next few weeks will be critical. What do you think? Is this the beginning of a new economic era or the start of a serious trouble for the Caribbean? Drop your thoughts in the comments.